Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Just waiting for people to funnel in now. It's 1 minute to give people a couple of minutes and then we'll get going. Okay, can see a couple of people joining now. Hi everyone. And a few more people joining. Hi everyone, nice to see you all. Okay, well, it's 3 o'clock and we don't want to keep the people that have arrived on time waiting, so we're going to crack on. People that join a few minutes late, they can catch up, it's all good. So welcome everyone to the second in our series of B2B webinar events, running these over the course of the next couple of months. And this series of webinars that we're running is all about how to generate leads, customers, and revenue by using webinars as a marketing strategy. Today, we're specifically focused on the what happens before the webinar, so the run up to your webinar. How do you engage an audience, get that audience to actually turn up on the webinar and be fully engaged with the content? And we're going to be speaking to two people today who are going to join me on the stage later who have done this all before. That's Josh and Dan. I'll do a bit more of an intro to them in a second. First of all, a little bit about myself for those who didn't come last week to the first in this series. So my name is Tom. I'm the CMO at Atomley, and I have 4 years of really sort of hands-on experience running webinars for my own businesses and my clients' businesses as well. And beyond that, I've also got about 10 years or so of sales and marketing experience within the technology and market research spaces as well. Joining me on the stage in 15 or 20 minutes will be Josh Treblecock, who is the head of marketing at Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? They're a really successful leadership performance consultancy that's based just over the bridge from me in Hammersmith in London. And they've been running a brilliant series of webinars for the last couple of years that we've been fortunate enough to help with and improve over the last couple of years as well. So they're going to be, Josh is going to be telling us a little bit about how they do it. And then we're also going to hear from Daniel Rose, who is a fantastic B2B copywriter that I've worked with personally a number of times. And he's written copy, articles, ebooks, and webinar content for some really big tech companies like Zapier and Reply.io as well. So a really good panel today, and we should have a really interesting conversation later about how to engage an audience before a webinar. First of all, what is the kind of objective of all of this? So as I discussed last week, it's all about how to generate the world's best customers using the world's best webinars, and it's all about how to increase revenue. So the advice that we're giving today is specifically about lead generation, customer generation webinars, not so much about market research webinars, thought leadership, market research webinars that might last for an hour or two. This is more specifically about lead generation webinars, but some of the principles apply to any type of format. And the way that we do this ourselves as Atomley, and the way that we recommend to our clients to do this, is in 3 stages. So we talk about acquisition, delivery, and conversion. And like I said, today we're focusing very heavily on the acquisition piece. What do you do before the webinar to make sure that people are actually turning up and they're engaged when they turn up? So we've broken the acquisition stage down into 3 substages. So those 3 substages are identify, content research, and attendee acquisition. So what I'm going to do today is run through each of these 3 substages. I'm going to talk about the problem statements that we hear from the market and that we've experienced ourselves when we run our own webinars or our customers' webinars. And then I'm going to kind of teach you or identify for you some of the ways that you can overcome those challenges and run better webinars or prepare better webinars as well. So really going quite deep into it today. Last week was a bit of a high level overview. Now we're really getting into the problems and solution statements. So, first of all, what are the problem statements that we hear within the identification process? What I mean by identification is trying to find the right audience. So what we often hear is that whoever's running the webinar has been told by their boss, the CEO, that they just want to reach everyone. They think that casting a really wide net is going to help them catch more leads. But we know that actually that's a bit of a fool's errand sometimes, because trying to spread yourself too thin just doesn't work. What we've also heard is that people aren't mapping out their audience properly. So they might have identified that they don't need to target everyone. They narrow it down a little bit, but they haven't really done the research properly on what their ICP, ideal customer profile, actually is. And an ICP splits down into the individual that you're targeting and also the company type that you're targeting as well. So it's important, and we'll talk a bit about how to do both of those things later. Next, not having the right tools to build lead lists. This is a really common problem. There's so many out there. Which one do I choose? And finally, not having the human resources to actually follow all of that up, to conduct the research, to enact the research, to to put on a good webinar. Some people just don't have some companies just don't have enough people. And I've heard it so many times. I've only got one or two SDRs. I can't just clone them. If there was such a thing, I would be doing that because they're great, but there's just not enough of them to do the work. So we've got some solutions for that as well. So what does good look like? How can we tackle each of these problems? So I'm just going to build this out and show you our kind of solutions to each of these problems. So when it comes to trying to target everyone, we think that internal education is the solution to this. It's making everyone else in the business realize that you just cannot do that. So targeting everyone really means nothing to anyone. And if you're going to do really good quality content and be really engaging and inviting the right people, you need to focus in on problem statements, and problem statements are shared by people that sit within the same persona group. So really what you want to be doing is targeting people that share the same job title, or share the same function at least, so that you can pretty much guarantee that their problem statements and the solutions that you're offering them in the webinar are actually going to hit home with them. Secondly is not having that clear view of your audience, not doing your ICP mapping. Like I said, it's about the persona and the company type that you're targeting. And there's loads of free tools out there that can help you with this. So we've often used the HubSpot free tool, which is fantastic at helping you sort of map this out. You can even give like a little avatar and a picture to each of your personas to help you recognize them. There's another free template from Smapley as well, and we actually built our own, which specifically focuses on this matrix of individuals and company types. So if you want access to that, send me an email or drop us a note at some point during the webinar, and we'll send that over to you, and that'll help you do this exercise. Thirdly, not having the right tools. Loads of solutions to this. It depends on your budget. So there are free tools out there. Again, we'll share the links, the hyperlinks in this later. Use free tools and write standard operating procedures for your team. Then you can really make the most of those tools. And if you've got the manpower but you don't have the budget, that's a really good solution. If you do have some budget and not the people in place, then offshoring this to there's great centers of excellence for this kind of stuff in APAC in particular. Sri Lanka, the Philippines, you can get really good cheap resource over there to help you with this. Latin America is becoming a really strong place to go and get this support as well now. Argentina and Brazil, there's some great SDRs and VAs over there. And if you've got a bit more budget and you want someone that's more local to the time zone here in Europe, then Eastern Europe is also good. And finally, if you've got more capital to invest, really investing in tools that are on the screen here is going to help you. We use Phantom Buster a lot, and I cannot speak highly enough of how much that's changed our process. Web scraping tools are fantastic. So I really do recommend that. And finally, lacking those resources, you can't really, like I said, you can't clone people. There's not much you can do about this, but being smart about how you deploy the resource. So applying the 80-20 rule, topping and tailing that list of people and just focusing on the top 20%. So that you're not trying to boil the ocean. You're focusing on the leads that you really want to find email addresses and phone numbers for example, and just enriching what you actually need. And again, if you've got the cash and you don't have the resource, offshoring is a brilliant way to do this. And we've got a list of suppliers that we can supply you with as well that can help with all of this stuff in different regions. We've just launched a poll as well. So if you want to answer the poll, that will give us an indication of which problems you face, can help us to address those problems as well in the Q&A later. Okay, so on to the problem statements regarding content research. Content research is super, super important. People don't do enough of it. And I'm going to explain a little bit why they don't do that and why it is important to do that. So like I said, if you're trying to target too many people, often your content is also going to try and be all things to all people, and it'll be really diluted and too broad, not specific enough. That also then leads to boring titles, boring descriptions on the registration pages, boring designs. What we've tried to do with our webinars is kind of spice it up a bit. We've used some animated character designs. We've built banners. We've done all sorts of different things to try and spice that up and make it a bit more interesting. And people will tend to join if they're not sure about the content, but they see some good visual design. They will usually join. So yeah, making sure it's not boring is really important. And also, when you're going too broad and too boring, people will just assume that you don't know what you're talking about. So they're just going to call bullshit on it. And they're going to say, do you know what? This doesn't look interesting. I'm not even going to bother turning up. And it's usually because someone that hasn't done the research has written the invites, written the registration page copy. And so actually, you can just tell that it's going to be boring. You know that the content's not going to be up to scratch. So again, what does good look like? Well, we think that there's two kind of key elements to building really good or to conducting really good content research. Those two things are audience value and remarkability. So all of the research that you do should be aiming to increase one of these two things or both of these two things at the same time. So when it comes to audience value, we're talking about, does the content that you're sharing in the registration page in the invite actually help your audience, your ICP, to understand what you're doing and really speak to them in their language? So the first step is desk research. And this is the boring bit that people don't do, but it is the first step, and you can't do the rest unless you do this effectively first. So we suggest that you take your time doing thorough desk research, looking at the problem statements that are already out there on the internet, then go to your sales team and ask your sales team to validate the desk research that you've done. If you've come up with a list of 20 problem statements, get your sales reps to tell you what they've heard in the marketplace, and then you can start to refine that list down a little bit. And then once you've done that, go and actually interview your existing customers, or if you don't have that many existing customers, your prospects that you're targeting at the moment through other channels, and ask them, what are your most pressing problems, and get them to rank and order those problems from top to bottom. Then you can actually start to focus on maybe 3 pain points, 5 pain points, and you'll get really targeted on what the audience that you're inviting is actually interested in seeing. So desk research, then live customer research, and then, like I say, you select the problems and you just solve for those problems, and you go with what the research tells you. It's really easy to get pulled in the direction of something that's a bit more snazzy, a bit more interesting, but it's not a current problem. It might be a future problem. Stick with what the research tells you to go with, and it will be useful for your audience. The second element is remarkability. So what we mean by remarkability is building an invite, building a registration page, building content that is remarkable, i.e. people want to talk about it, they want to tell other people about it, and then you get that word of mouth growth, and that sort of promotional marketing effort will start to snowball. So finding particular phrases or language that matches your ICP's preferences is really important. Engineers, if you're targeting engineers, they like specific product specifications, for example, or salespeople love return on investment statistics. Creative people prefer more imagery to text. So matching the way that you present your webinar, both in terms of the on the day content and the marketing content, to your audience, and making sure there's an alignment there is really important. Also, being very specific about the outcomes. You'll notice in all of our webinars, we have 3 bullet pointed outcomes. And that's a really good way of helping people understand what they're going to get out of this if they turn up to the webinar. And you also need to build a reputation for actually pulling through on that and actually delivering on the outcomes that you say you're going to deliver on. Seems like common sense, but if people turn up to a webinar, they don't get what they're promised, they won't come again next time. And also finding a really good guest speaker, or 2 in our case today, is really important. Surveys that we've looked at, research that we've done indicates that 70% of webinar guests expect to see a guest or a case study or a use case from an existing customer. There's also a raft of other types of people that you can invite to be a guest as well, including partners, like we're doing today, and customers. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more next week. So if you want to learn more about how to select a great guest and to incorporate their content, come along next week, and we're going to talk more about that there as well. And then the final substage is the acquisition, and lots of people fall short on this. So what we mean by acquisition is the process of going out, inviting people, and then attracting them, getting them to click on the register button. So problems that we see, again, not distributing to enough people, usually because the target size of the pool of people that you're targeting is going to be too small. And then when those drop off, then you end up with an even smaller pool of people that you're marketing to actively in the run up to a webinar. So making sure that you increase your distribution volume as much as possible, more than you need, is very important. Not having the right tools for effective outreach. Obviously, I'm joking around with the picture here, but there are lots of different ways that you can reach people. Just using one on its own doesn't work, which comes on to my next point. Multi-channel approach is really the only way to do it effectively now, and that incorporates lots of different channels: email, phone, text, web, chatbots. There's all sorts of different ways to do this, and making sure that you're using all of them is very important. And then the promotional marketing that goes along with your direct outbound invites, it has to complement and supplement the outbound work that you're doing. You might have a list of 1,000 people that you target. You also want another 1,000 people to see it through social media, through ads, etc. So making sure that you do that supplementary marketing is very important. So again, what does good look like for this? How do we solve those challenges? With regards to making sure that you reach enough people, what we find is really useful is actually to work up your funnel. So working backwards from what your desired result would be. So if you're looking for, I don't know, let's say 5 or 10 qualified leads, you might need to get 40 attendees, which means you need to get 100 registrations, which means you need to target 500 people. We're going to show the actual stats from Will It Make the Boat Go Faster, which is Josh's company, over their last few webinars, so you get an understanding of industry standards. And we also showed Tom's from DataSparks last week as well. So over this series, you'll start to understand what good stats look like, and it will help you to do this sort of backwards reverse calculation as well. Utilizing automation tools helps you to do multi-channel outreach. We've used half a dozen or so in the last year. We've been testing out lots of different ones. I would say that the best ones are in the order that are on the screen here. So the top one is Meet Alfred. We use Meet Alfred currently. We tried Lemlist, relatively good. We tried Skylead, relatively good. There are dozens of others that we have heard are either not that great or more expensive. And we think that these 3 are pretty good. I would definitely recommend Meet Alfred. It's what we're using right now, and it's very cost effective. In terms of the kind of supplementary marketing, making the event really easy to find. Sounds obvious, but people don't do it. So this is a screenshot from Josh's company's website, Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? Really easy to find the webinars. They're in the insights section. Those guys also have a banner on the homepage as well, pointing people towards the latest webinar. So, people that are just happen to land on the website will also learn about the webinar, not just the people that you're actively targeting. And then also, like I said earlier, designing really nice visuals is important. Is an example of bad and good here. To be honest, the one at the bottom, the good one, is still a bit busy. It might benefit from being decluttered a little bit, but you've got everything that you need there, and it's stylized to the brand of the company that's running that webinar. So it's better than the top one for that reason. Using LinkedIn events to do further promotion. LinkedIn's algorithm is really sort of pushing events at the moment. It's free. You don't have to run it in the LinkedIn Live Events platform. You can run it on another platform like what we're doing today, but it's a really good way of distributing the word about your webinar to the whole LinkedIn audience, which is 500 million people online. Promoting your content and events in other people's posts is a bit sneaky, but it works. So finding an influencer or a group that talks about, in our case, webinars, and then posting links to our content is a really good way of doing that. And then finally, leveraging the networks of your partners and your employees, your guest speakers. The LinkedIn algorithm loves it when people like and comment on an original post rather than sharing. So the bigger the network that you can tap into, the more people that are going to find out about it effectively. So those are our kind of tips and tricks. I'm going to stop talking now. I'm going to move over to the interview. So I'll invite the other guys to join me on stage. And while they're doing that, just a brief reminder again for those of you that came last week, we are going to be using our own technology to run a survey today to understand inputs from you guys, the audience, on how we've done, and also to understand your problem statements better so that we can help you solve them. Every time someone fills in this survey, we will be donating one meal to a child in need through the charity Magic Breakfast. You do not have to contribute anything. We will donate on your behalf as a thank you for filling in the survey. Okay, so Josh and Dan are here. Hi guys, can you hear me okay?
Hi Tom, all good? All good? Audio-wise?
Hey Dan. Perfect. Okay, well, we're gonna start with Josh. I've got a couple of questions for you, Josh, as part of the kind of interview, if you will.
Far away.
And then we'll move on to Dan, and then we'll go to broadcast audience questions. So guys, please put your questions in the chat. Actually, no, it's not down there, it's over this side, if I'm pointing in the right direction. Right hand side of your screen, please do ask questions as we go through. So Josh, obviously I've worked with you a couple of times on your webinars. Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? A really successful program of marketing that you're doing there. I know that you have a 6-week sort of webinar preparation process that you use that we developed, and you've been optimizing that further over the last couple of years. So can you sort of explain broadly how you run that 6-week process for the benefit of the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me on, Tom. So just to give a bit of context, I guess I've been working at Will It for almost 4 years, and in the marketing part of Will It for nearly 3 of those. We've just run our 14th webinar last week, having run them kind of since the start of the pandemic. And in that kind of series and time frame, we've really looked at how we can optimize it with Tom and Hugh, optimizing our processes around it, trying to take a kind of strategic approach to, improving the amount of people who are coming on, who are attending, who are engaging with those webinars. So hopefully within that time, we've got some stuff worth sharing for you all attending today. But I guess, for that 6-week window in the kind of lead up to one of our webinars, I normally take the first 2 weeks to put in a lot of time to researching the topic. So I read a hell of a lot, look at different news sites, LinkedIn, research publications. So The Economist, The Times, New Statement, lots of articles to try and get a kind of steer on anything I can get my hands on to get a gauge on what people are talking about and the common challenges businesses are feeling. I'd then kind of step into the next stage of it where I look at talking to other people in our company. I talk to sales, I talk to the consultants we use, and try and get a kind of handle on what people are telling us, the issues they're coming across, what obstacles they're facing. So combine that with the research we've done, and getting basically different people to input into that. And the idea of that, the output of that, is that we home in on kind of one pain point that our target market would be really looking to well, is really struggling with the idea that we could run a webinar that runs loosely on what we could help them with our expertise, but also how we could remedy it and link it to our products and solutions. Um,
Sure.
and I guess, yeah, those after those first 2 weeks, we've refined that messaging around that. We try and create, a bit of copy around that, keep it as snappy as possible and as tuned into their needs as possible. But
Mhm.
doing all the things that Tom has just been talking about, in the sense that we'd refine that messaging, but we'd keep it kind of linked to that pain point, linked into that, um, and try and structure a session basically around what would be most useful for those people. So trying to keep it super practical in terms of the content of those sessions, we'd basically normally structure it around 3 key recommendations. So we'd normally put 3 bits of content that address that pain point in detail, so they're coming away thinking, these guys really know me. They know that
Mm.
what I'm struggling with, and they can really help me.
Yeah.
And in doing that, you kind of build up a kind of um, you build up an image of you as a thought leader in that space, but also you build a genuine kind of helpful value add relationship, where they may think of you in
Mm.
terms of providing something for them.
Yeah, and
Um,
you guys have got obviously Ben, who's a ex-Olympic gold winner, and Tom, the other partner within the business. Both of those guys have got a massive audience on LinkedIn and very well respected in their field. So that helps you as well, right, in terms of being able to get out there. And really, it's just a matter of time until you can build. Obviously, they've got Ben's got his celebrity status, and that really helps. But it is possible over time to build this thought leadership status and to use that in your outreach to generate more leads or more attendees on your webinar.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm pretty lucky in the fact that we have Ben as like ex-Olympian, gold medalist, and that does have a kind of status thing to it, an authority. If we're talking about, kind of high performance and high performing leaders in the work we do, um, we link a lot of our content from Ben's story and his route to his gold medal, to the content about how we can help businesses, kind of get clarity on their direction and then support them to achieve it, by raising their performance. So I guess one thing we do use that quite a lot is through posting through LinkedIn, through personal profiles. So with the people we have that facilitate for us, particularly Ben, Tom, and Jamie's another one, we use their personal profiles in different ways. So to promote the webinars we run, I'd normally ask each of them to do a promotion video that we put out on their personal profile. We create a bit of content on there that's kind of helpful advice in its own right, in its kind of own right as a post. But then you'd put the invite at the bottom. So the posts normally do quite well on their own anyway, and off the back of it, you start to build up quite a lot of registrants. So the recent example was on the one last week. We had Tom's video got 90 likes, Ben's got 160 likes, and from them you might get kind of 20, 30 registrants, and that starts to build up if you're promoting for a kind of 4 week window.
Mm.
But we also combine that with email outreach, which is another thing I think we're going to go on to talk about, Tom. But we tend to do one email a week in the 4 week lead up, and we've kind of built a network around that. And once you start to kind of build that network each time you do a webinar, it kind of snowballs from there.
So, am I right in saying then that you've built effectively an existing mailing list over time? I mean, last time I checked in with you, there was over 2,000 people on that list, i.e., people that have turned up to the first 13. So they're a good target to invite to the 14th and the 15th. But then you're also adding on net new as well, right? So you're identifying new people to top up that funnel, if you will, as well. Is there like a rough split that you find between people that are returning from rolling over from previous and people that are
Yeah.
coming in from net new?
Yeah, so I'd say at the moment we tend to have about kind of 60% of attendees, I'd say, returning from
Mhm.
that group that we built up. 40%, I'd say roughly would be net new, so new time first time watchers. Um, but I guess, as I said, we've been doing this since the start of the pandemic, so just over 2 years. And I guess we've created that mailing list, and I think we're on 2,700 now, followers for that mailing list. So webinars are a big part of that, because each time we do one, that net new just gets put into the mailing list bucket. Um, and they also will
Mm.
receive our monthly newsletter as well. So that's another way we kind of uh, get new people into that mailing list. But each time we run a webinar, that's probably the biggest addition to that network as we expand it.
Yeah, and
Uh,
it works, right, as well, because I think a lot of people are concerned or scared, worried about starting this whole process because, oh, it's going to take 2 years, it's going to take 3 years to get to the point where you guys are. But actually, you've seen a lot of success over. Like, you're really reaping the rewards now. So I've just put up on screen the latest aggregated stats from the last 3 webinars that you guys have put on, and that was since we started working with you guys. So we've got access to this. I know that there was a sort of steadily increasing KPIs up to this point as well, but I know that the Atomley surveys have really helped you guys to sort of refine that mid-funnel piece as well. And I think a lot of people are worried about starting the process because it seems like a big investment. But once you get into the swing of it, you know, the difference between running your fourth and fifth or your seventh and eighth is what's the word? It deteriorates over time. The amount of actual input decreases over time that you need to do, right? Because you guys have got your process, you've got your people in place, you know what you're doing, you've got your mailing list, and so these stats are ever increasing. Do you want to just talk to us a little bit about how you've optimized this over the last couple of webinars that you've done since the end of last year?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess worth pointing out here, that we were consistently kind of getting 500 or so registrants, good attendance rates of 50% or more, and great feedback in terms of the delivery, and consistently getting, kind of 8 to 9 to 10 averages on the feedback scores. But I guess we always felt we needed a way of harvesting that more than we were, in terms of we were getting great engagement from those people, but was it converting? How many were converting into meetings and then to actual sales opportunities that were
Mm.
quite fully qualified? Um, so that was where Tom and Hugh were key, really, with Atomly we brought in, which is great in terms of converting that attention to the point of real sales meetings and opportunities. But taking this kind of funnel structured approach of working back and looking back at what you can actually be doing was really useful for us. I think it helped us be far more strategic around, through each stage of that funnel, where are we converting the most people? So I think between the registration page was a particular issue we looked at, didn't we, Tom, in terms of creating a registration page that was much more visually and aesthetically kind of attractive.
Yeah.
We went from a kind of basic form on GoToWebinar to what we have today, which is a kind of registration page that shares the speakers. It looks far more interesting, and the old page, I think, would probably put people off, because it's kind of like, what am I putting my information into? But now it's kind of like, this is a will it page. This is something
Mm.
we feel confident about.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different ways along the funnel that we've worked on, and kind of introducing pre-webinar calls, loads of different ways in terms of how we looked at that in a much more structured way to increase the conversion at each point, and ultimately to get more attendees, more of the exact people we want. Uh, on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're just going to start the survey in the background here. I think we've done a great job, or you guys have done a great job with that. Obviously, we've just supported with it, really, and you already had a great process in place before we started to help you as well. And the results now in terms of revenue are much better, because I know previously you were getting really high attendance, really high registration attendance, but that like middle to bottom of funnel piece wasn't quite working out properly.
Yeah.
And over the last 3 or 4 webinars, you guys have generated 80 odd K of closed business. You've got another almost 100K in pipeline there as well. And that all flows on when you invite people to your next webinar. That will flow on, and you will continue to generate more from that. So it's fantastic. I'm just going to stop there with Josh. Sorry, I've just realised the time. I've been talking to you for far too long.
No worries.
Dan, I'm so sorry. we've been chattering on here, Dan. I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about your side of the things. Obviously, a professional copywriter, been doing that for a number of years. I guess from a copywriting point of view, so Josh looks at the strategy, does a lot of the kind of preparation across the board, and leads a team of people that does this stuff. But when it comes to copywriting specifically, I know that you do a lot of interviews, as we talked about this in the content earlier, a lot of interviews as part of your copywriting process. So what kind of questions are you kind of asking people when you do an interview with one of your customers to work out what their pain points are? And how do you kind of translate that then into content and into something that you would put on a registration page that's going to resonate with an audience member?
Yeah, sure. As you said, research is just so critical. You've picked up on it a lot during the webinar already, how important it is to get away from that vague messaging where you're trying to appeal to everyone. So going for that research, asking what the pain points are. One of the ones I find most helpful to ask is along the lines of what was going on in your life / what was going on in your business when you decided you needed a solution like this. Because that helps you not only get to the idea of what the pain was, but what was going on in their lives. What was the situation like? How did they experience that pain point? And then going beyond that, I shared it with you earlier. Before I was a copywriter, I actually worked in quality control. That was my first job out of school. And one of the things that we were taught was like, when something went wrong, you had to find the root cause of why it went wrong. And one of the things we were taught to use was a process called the 5 whys, which is exactly what it sounds like. You'd ask why 5 times. So say some of the manufacturing equipment broke and you were writing up this non-conformance report. Great fun. You can imagine why I'm no longer a quality control manager. But you'd ask, right, okay, it's not enough to say, oh, what went wrong? The machine broke. Well, why did the machine break? Well, because somebody put the wrong settings in. Well, why did somebody put the wrong settings in? Because they weren't trained properly. And you go down and down, and then you get to this root cause. And that's what they wanted to see, that you're getting to why these things were going on. Of course, it's a bit different for the copywriting side of things. But when you ask somebody what was going on, what was your pain point, you tend to, the first time you ask, you get quite a high level answer. Say you're selling CRM software. What was going on? Well, we decided we needed to manage our contacts, our customers better. We needed to manage customer relationships. It's kind of obvious, really, isn't it? But then, why did you need to manage customer relationships? What were you doing before? What solution did you use before? What was wrong with that? Well, we were using an Excel spreadsheet, right? Why wasn't that working? Oh, too much information in too little space. And as you get deeper and deeper, you get that specific language. And that's what I'm looking for as a copywriter, for whether you're doing it on the webinar slides, the registration page, any of that. You want to be able to use their language and the specific language to reflect that back at them, so that when they read those slides, when they read that page, they're like, they get it. They know what it's like to have this problem. They know exactly what I'm going through. And that makes it more likely then that when you say that you have a solution for it, if you know what the problem is and you say you have a solution, it's a lot more believable than if you go, oh, are you looking to manage a new CRM software? But
yeah.
If you can get into,
Exactly.
I know these pains, these are the solutions. So
using their language builds credibility, obviously, because it proves that you actually understand. People are, I think, often, and this goes back to some of the content that I presented earlier, by being too broad in the audience that you're targeting, people are afraid to use industry-specific acronyms or terms, or there's lots of sales and marketing jargon. If I wasn't targeting a sales and marketing person, I would hate to use, words like top of funnel or, things like that. But if those are the types of people that I'm targeting and they get that and they understand what to do with that information, then that's perfect. And I think trying to
Exactly. It's the
get
sort of
rid
thing
of
then
that
of having
concern.
that specific thing that you know what they're talking about. As you say, jargon, I hate it. And it's very easy when you're very close to an industry. So to use that jargon, like you say, we're working in marketing, we use top of funnel, bottom of funnel all the time. And we know exactly what it means. But somebody may not, which is when you talk to the customers, you might find there are aspects of jargon that they use. There might be terms that they regularly use, and putting that into your copywriting reflects, right, okay, they do know what I'm talking about, whereas you want to avoid that other jargon where you're too close to the industry, you're too close to the product, but you don't know what your customers are saying.
Exactly. So when you've kind of got down, I like to think of it as a reverse pyramid. If you fix the bottom brick, it helps you to keep the rest of it stable, right? So that's why you're asking those 5 whys to get to the core, the cornerstone, like the bottom brick of that pyramid. So when you find out what that is and you want to build a webinar that gives you 3 solutions to how to fix that problem, for example, how do you then condense that problem statement down into an invite that might be an email that's 2 paragraphs or 2 sentences, or onto a landing page where you've got at maximum sort of half a page to work with? What are your kind of tips for how to condense that content down properly?
Well, is this time for Daniel Rose's 5 tips? There
It is. I've got a slide for this. Charlie, if you can just stop sharing a second, I'm going to share something. I want Dan to sort of walk us through it because it's really helpful and it's helped me a lot in the past to think about things like this. So if you can talk us through this, Dan, that would be great.
And it does say copywriting tips for invitations, but I find these work, again, for virtually any copywriting that you're doing, including that registration page, the webinar slides. So that first tip is about using these established copywriting formulas as a foundation. Like you were talking about these certain things like top of funnel. There's certain formulas that copywriters use all the time. My favorite is PAS, which is problem, agitation, solution. You were talking earlier, right? What problems are they facing? Make sure those problems are real by using that specific language and agitating it, presenting the solution. Another one is AIDA, attention, interest, desire, action. So using these, and I do say as a foundation, not as, right, you're going to write out and that's going to come out, but by thinking in terms of that, you've got a compelling journey in where you're going. You're going from the problem to the solution. You're going from the attention to the action. So that really works well to get that initial foundation. But from that, then you go into the next bit, asking what's in it for me. That's always from the customer's point of view. Again, when you're so close to an industry, to your product, especially if you've designed this thing and it uses the latest technology and it's amazing. You've got to think, right, I care about that. Does my audience? Something I see on websites quite regularly is where they start on the homepage talking about the company history, right, where we were founded 200 years ago, and this was the name of the founder, and his great-grandfather worked in a coal mine. And unless you're selling coal mine related products, then it's not relevant. So think, right, go back to that research that you've done, those customer interviews. What is it the customer actually cares about? One I saw for like broadband, for a while, there was a company that was advertising how they use a specific type of cable. Nobody cares about what type of cable you use for your broadband. They care that they can see cat videos a lot faster than they can before. It's getting to what they care about, which is what's in it for me. Always be asking that. The third bit then is every word should have a purpose. The way I like to think about it is that if you were paying by the word, would you have that word in there? I remember when I used to send text messages and they weren't all covered by an unlimited plan, you'd be like, all right, I can only fit this many words into this text message, otherwise I have to pay for 2. It doesn't mean that your message, your copywriting invitation, or your landing page is as short as humanly possible, but it means you think about each word. Is this word building anticipation? Is this word building, you talked about like remarkability or relevance? Is this serving a purpose? If it doesn't serve a purpose, get it out of there. You really have to be as concise as possible. Little tricks then, like using bullet points then to get, right, okay, by the very word, like, right, quick, short, sharp points there. What are they going to learn? What, who's it for? What will the advantages will they get? That kind of thing. The next one then is about writing in the first person. I say not B2B. I'm assuming a lot of the people watching are in B2B, but what I mean to that is it's very easy, again, when you're close to an industry, to take on that jargon, to take on that, oh, we're business to business, and you're thinking very abstract terms, but you're not thinking about the person who's reading that invitation. You're not thinking about the person who's reading that landing page. They've got their own specific problems. They're not thinking about the company as a whole necessarily. They're thinking, oh, I really need to solve this because this will make my job easier. Talking in the language to them and talking as a person. If you're a company inviting somebody else, it sounds like, all right, this has gone to a million other people. If I've got an invitation from Tom Parker and I know Tom's going to be speaking to me, then right, okay, that starts to build that personal connection as well. So, and then finally, reading it aloud. We all know cheesy sales messages. Our spam folder's probably full of them. We've all had them a million times before. And what gets me is that we will see this message and go, oh, that's just so salesy. Oh, right, delete. And then we'll write the same kind of thing ourselves because that's what we've been taught is like, all right, you have to write, oh, hi, have you ever been struggling with this? This is a new solution for you, new and improved. It comes across as dreadful. What, again, it comes back to reading as that person, but being able to just say, right, if I was saying this aloud to a colleague, if I was saying it aloud to a family member, would they think I just lost my mind, or would they think, oh, actually, that sounds something interesting? But think of if you've ever had a kid who's tried to convince you that they need the latest PlayStation or something like that. They can use very convincing language, but they don't sound like an advert. You know, they're, oh, well, you know, it's got a new 500 megabit processor. They talk in real language as humans speak.
Yeah.
And that's a lot more effective than any super salesy template that you can find floating about on the internet. And those are my 5 complimentary tips.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've used these tips before. I mean, well, I've used Dan to do our copywriting before, and that's much more effective. But when we don't have the funds to use Dan's help, then we're using these tips. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, even if you just stick to this and you take it at face value and do a very basic pass through all of your copy, and even just using 1 or 2 of these, like reading it out loud, is so obvious. But when you actually do it and you hear yourself saying these cheesy, horrible things, it's so cringeworthy, and it's much better to, you know, give it a good pass through, take your time to prepare, take your time to strip words out that are really unnecessary. There's nothing worse than a whole paragraph full of fluff where you only need 1 sentence. And yeah, these tips have really helped us in the past. So we're going to distribute these afterwards with your blessing as well, Dan. And hopefully other people can learn from it too. Charlie's just going to put the thermometer back up on the screen. So if anyone hasn't filled in the survey yet, please do. It's in the chat. You can click the link in the chat, or you can scan the QR code. I'm just going to move on to the last question, which is a question that I'm going to be asking all of the guests over this whole series, and I'll go to Josh first. What do you think the future of virtual events, or how virtual events will interact with other event types, what do you think that's going to look like in the future as we come out of COVID and there's lots of sort of market movement at the moment? It'd be good to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's looking as if things are moving towards much more kind of virtual, much more interactive virtual events. So in a similar way to what you're doing today, Tom, like on this platform, we've got chats, we've got polls. But I think with digital events, you can be accessing and tapping into a lot more people than you would with physical events. So I think, you know, take our strategy, for example, where we're probably going to continue doing webinars as part of just our ongoing marketing strategy, really. We'll probably stick to doing it kind of quarterly webinars with some physical events thrown in. But I think the amount of virtual events is going to stick with it. I think that's been a change that will stick, really.
Yeah. agree. I think also as well. We have, particularly over the last couple of months in the UK, we've seen a drop off in the number of virtual events and also the attendance of virtual events. Like Josh, you shared some stats with me about your event last week and the one previous at the start of this year.
Yeah.
Less people actually coming live, signing up before, but more people watching it on demand in the weeks following. And you're actually generating leads longer term off of a piece of content. So
Yeah.
there is at the moment certainly a shift away from this medium in terms of volume, but that gives you an opportunity if you're doing it right and you're doing it well. Actually, it's spotlighting people that are doing it properly. And so you can cut through the noise a little bit. There's less noise around. You can cut through it better, and you can still be really successful. Like we said last week, hybrid events are definitely going to be the future as well. Dan, your 2 cents on that?
There we go. Yeah, it's been interesting, hasn't it? Because with the COVID situation, a lot of people had a lot more time and were watching more events online, and so we would have seen that spike. But we've had webinars now for a good few years, but pre-COVID, I think you could get away with just turning up, throwing up a few slides, doing that, and making your offer. You could do whatever you wanted practically, and people would turn up because of a bit of the novelty factor. That novelty factor is worn off now, well and truly. It may have had that little resurgence due to COVID, but then again, as people are getting back to live events, it's like, right, okay, a webinar takes time. It's like what we look at, a 45-minute event, an hour event. Asking people to do that, it's a big investment for their time. But so people who do turn up, then you've got to make sure they have value, and you've got to reward them turning up. So like Josh was saying, they're having a lot more of the interactivity like we're having on this one. I could see that going further and further. I mean, there will be the time, maybe augmented reality, VR, bringing all these technologies in there, but doing it in such a way where you'll have that initial factor where it's like, oh, exciting, it's a VR webinar, oh, it's AR. After that splash has died down, you'll see, I believe, the ones who are able to use those new technologies to bring added value. So it's not just a wow factor. It's like, right, okay, with this VR thing, we're going to be able to show you exactly how to do it. We're going to bring you right into the middle of this different environment to show you this problem and how to solve it in ways that would be impossible in a traditional webinar. So that's why I think using the new technologies in new exciting ways to really help viewers.
Yeah, definitely. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to shade this, but I'm just going to do it anyway. I showed this to Dan the other day, and we both agreed that it's pretty awesome. So I'm just going to put it up on the screen. So this is Lemlist. The guys that run Lemlist, they have founded a company called Lemverse, and they're now starting to use the investment capital and success that they've had to build new types of products and services. This is a virtual event space that they've built, a little bit like a computer game, I suppose. But in each of these rooms here, there's a separate audio channel. So they actually operate their company by telling their staff to always be in this virtual world while they're at work. And then if they want to do a conference meeting, they go into this room and this is their conference center. So they can all meet up with each other in there. Or if they want to do like a quick one-to-one chat, then if you sit on top of one of these sofas, it opens up a separate audio channel for that particular area. So I think this could be certainly the future of the way that the immediate future of where this is going. And I agree. I think VR ultimately will be where this goes. At the moment, if you're running an event in VR, it's only really PC gamers that are going to join it, right? So you have to be pretty targeted towards that audience. But I'm sure in the future there will be, a place for VR as well. So I couldn't agree more with that. And I think, it's just a super interesting space at the moment. Cool. Well, we're coming up to the hour. I don't want to take up too much people's time. We've run over a little bit. Just to do a really quick promotion of the next webinar. It was going to be next week, but we've decided to push it back a little bit more. So it's going to be on the 22nd of June. You will have either received an invite already, or you can click the link that's just been put in the chat on the right-hand side. Next time, we're going to be talking to Sonia, who actually works for Tevent, which is this platform that we're using now. And we're going to be talking all about what to do during the webinar. So that's the content, the technology, and also the sort of understanding people's feedback and intent using the survey. So we're going to be covering that in more detail next time. Again, thanks Josh and Dan for your time, really insightful. We'll be sharing the recording and all the content with people afterwards so that you can watch it again. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining and filling out the survey. We've already contributed over 20 meals to the charity, which is fantastic, and we'll continue to do that for the rest of the series and hopefully help more children in need get their breakfast and hopefully learn better because they're not hungry at school, which is really important. So thanks everyone. Thanks guests, guys, Dan and Josh. Thank you very much. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the next one. Cheers. Bye-bye.